Real men cry in silence, not because they are weak, but because they have been taught that the world might not understand their pain. Society often raises boys to believe that tears are signs of fragility, that silence is strength, and that expression is a luxury reserved for others. But the truth is far more profound. The quiet tears of a man are not signs of defeat. They are evidence of depth. They speak of battles fought internally, of emotions deeply felt, and of responsibilities carried with quiet resilience. In a world where masculinity is often equated with emotional numbness, real men challenge that narrative. They experience grief, loss, disappointment, and heartbreak, just like anyone else. But they've learned to channel these feelings inward, not because they lack emotion, but because they've been conditioned to protect others from seeing their vulnerability. This silence is not emptiness, it is a storm of emotion held with control. The kind of control that comes not from denial, but from maturity. Healing, for these men, doesn't always happen in public. It takes place in quiet rooms, in long drives alone, in late-night thoughts, in early morning reflections. It's the internal process of acknowledging pain, forgiving themselves, and rebuilding piece by piece. There are no applause, no cheering crowds, and often no one watching. Yet that is where the real work happens. That's where transformation begins. And healing in private requires more bravery than many can comprehend. It's an act of confronting oneself without distractions, without validation, and without excuses. And then they rise. But they rise not for attention or recognition. They rise because they refuse to remain broken. They rise with lessons learned, pain reshaped into wisdom, and silence forged into strength. This strength doesn't shout. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply exists in how they carry themselves, how they treat others with empathy, and how they take responsibility for their emotions. The rise of a real man is not dramatic, it's disciplined, it's consistent, it's grounded in understanding that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a superpower. A man who has felt deeply, healed honestly, and grown silently becomes the kind of presence that brings peace rather than pressure. So when you see a man who may seem distant, quiet, or emotionally reserved, understand he might be doing the hardest work of all, feeling everything deeply and holding it with strength. That is not silence from weakness, it is silence forged by fire. And that fire creates the kind of man this world desperately needs. When a man is broken, his silence speaks louder than words. It's not always the shouting, the anger, or the outbursts that reveal a man's pain. Sometimes it's the absence of expression, the sudden stillness, the long stares into nothing. That silence is not emptiness, it is full of unsaid emotions, buried disappointments, and a weight he doesn't know how to share. His silence is a language complex, quiet, and deeply misunderstood. From a young age, many men are taught to suppress, not express. They're told to man up, to stay strong, and to never show signs of weakness. So when life breaks them through betrayal, loss, failure, or inner battles, they often don't reach out. They retreat, not because they don't want help, but because they don't believe they're allowed to ask for it. His silence is where he hides his fear of being seen as weak. It's where he questions his worth, his choices, and sometimes even his purpose. He might still go to work, smile at others, perform his duties, but behind those eyes, there's a quiet war going on. And the world rarely notices because it's too used to seeing men as protectors, not people in need of protection. But silence is never just silence. It's a form of grief when words aren't enough. It's a defense mechanism when trust has been broken. It's a coping strategy when pain becomes too heavy to explain. And when a man goes silent, it's often because he's processing emotions that are too big, too raw, or too confusing to put into words. It's the mind working overtime, trying to piece together dignity in a world that doesn't always allow space for his emotional truth. This is why it's important to understand and educate not just men, but everyone on the reality that emotional expression is not gendered. That silence isn't strength when it leads to suffering in isolation. That a broken man doesn't need judgment, he needs compassion. He needs people who listen not just with ears, but with understanding. When a man is broken and silent, he is not ignoring the world. He is fighting to find himself in it. And in that silence, he is trying to rebuild quietly, slowly, painfully. The most powerful support is not forcing him to speak, but letting him know that when he is ready, he will be heard without shame. Because silence may be the loudest cry a man can make, and sometimes it's not what he says, it's what he can't bring himself to say that tells you just how deeply he's hurting. Behind every guarded man is a story he's afraid to tell. He may appear distant, emotionally unavailable, careful with his words, slow to trust, but none of this is without reason. His guarded nature is not arrogance, and it's not indifference. It is protection built slowly, layer by layer, through experiences that taught him vulnerability comes with a cost. A guarded man has likely loved deeply once, maybe more than once, and lost more than he speaks of. He may have given his trust only to have it broken. He may have shown his heart only to have it mishandled. And now, instead of openly offering his emotions, he keeps them behind locked doors, not because he doesn't feel, but because he feels too much. He has a story, but that story has scars. Perhaps it was abandonment in childhood, betrayal in adulthood, or emotional wounds that never got time or space to heal. Whatever the cause, it taught him to keep quiet, to stay safe, to appear strong. He learned to suppress what hurt, because when he once opened up, it wasn't safe. The world didn't handle his honesty with care, it used it as leverage, or worse, ignored it altogether. So now, silence becomes his safety, humor becomes his mask, independence becomes his armor. He shows strength on the surface, not to deceive others, but to survive in a world that often asks men to bear everything and express nothing. But beneath all that, he wants to be understood. He wants to tell his story, but only when he knows it will be met with respect, not pity. With patience, not pressure. He waits for someone who sees beyond the wall, who recognizes the protection, not the rejection. This is why emotional intelligence matters not just for women seeking to understand men, but for society as a whole. A guarded man doesn't need someone to fix him. He needs someone to understand why the walls exist and to approach them not with force, but with gentleness. The truth is, his guardedness is not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of what he's been through. And until the world creates safe spaces for men to be honest, to share pain, to speak truthfully without being shamed or judged, many will remain locked in their own stories. But when you finally earn a guarded man's trust, and he lets you hear his truth, it's not just a story you receive. It's a part of his soul, and that kind of honesty is rare, raw, and deeply real. Because behind every guarded man is a history, a heart, and a hope that one day, someone will care enough to listen. A strong man protects more than her body, he protects her peace. Strength in a man is often misunderstood. Society tends to define it by muscle, dominance, or physical protection. But real strength is measured not just in how a man defends her from the outside world, but in how he makes her feel safe within herself. It's not about standing in front of threats. It's about ensuring she never feels like she has to face them alone. A strong man doesn't just guard her from harm. He becomes a place where she can rest emotionally. He listens without dismissing her thoughts. He understands that her battles are not always visible, and that protecting her peace means tuning in to what weighs on her heart even when she doesn't say a word. He learns her silence, he respects her boundaries. He never uses her insecurities as weapons or her vulnerabilities as weaknesses. Instead, he creates an atmosphere where she can be soft without fear, where she doesn't feel like she has to constantly be in survival mode. With him, she doesn't need to pretend to be strong every second because he never mistakes her softness for fragility. This kind of man doesn't compete with her energy, he complements it. He doesn't create chaos in her life, he reduces it. He speaks with intention, he moves with patience, and he knows that real love is not a possession, it's a sanctuary. To protect her peace means being mindful of what you bring into her space. Your words, your tone, your decisions, each one either adds to her emotional safety or erodes it. A strong man is aware of that responsibility, and he carries it with care. He doesn't wait for her to break down before he shows up. He shows up so she doesn't have to break down in the first place. This protection of peace goes beyond conflict. It's how he supports her dreams without ego, how he reassures her without needing to be asked, how he allows her to be fully herself, flaws, fears, passions, and all without ever making her feel less than. A strong man knows that true masculinity is not about control, it's about consistency. It's not about silencing her, it's about amplifying her sense of security. And in a world that constantly drains a woman's energy, he becomes the rare space that restores it. That's real protection, not just of her body but of her peace, her spirit, and her sense of self. You know he's a man when he doesn't fear a woman's strength. Real masculinity does not shrink in the presence of a powerful woman. It respects it, honors it, and stands beside it. A man who is secure in himself doesn't compete with her intellect, her independence, or her voice. He celebrates it because he knows that true strength is not about overpowering, it's about empowering. He doesn't feel the need to dim her light to feel seen. Her success doesn't threaten him. Her confidence doesn't intimidate him. Her ambition doesn't make him feel small. In fact, it inspires him, because he's done the inner work to know his value doesn't come from control, but from character. He understands that when two strong people come together, they don't cancel each other out, they multiply each other's potential. This kind of man is rare because it takes deep maturity to recognize that power in a woman is not a challenge to authority, it's an invitation to partnership. He doesn't try to silence her voice, he listens to it. He doesn't try to limit her dreams, he contributes to them. He sees her strength not as competition, but as a complement to his own. He's not threatened by her independence because he has his own. He's not insecure about her leadership because he knows how to lead and how to follow when needed. He doesn't need to dominate conversations to feel heard, nor does he need to control outcomes to feel important. This is what separates a grown man from a boy in a man's body. The boy is unsettled by a woman who knows who she is. He sees her as a challenge to his ego. But the man is grounded enough to stand beside her without needing to be above her. He sees her power and doesn't run from it, he respects it. He embraces the balance she brings, and in that, he finds a different kind of strength. The kind rooted in humility, in self-awareness, and in love without conditions. Because real men don't just admire strong women, they are strong enough to walk with them, without fear, without pride, and without trying to be more. They just are. And that quiet confidence is what allows real relationships to grow in trust, respect, and equality. So when he doesn't fear her strength, you know he's not just any man. He's the kind of man worth keeping.